what would you say is kind of the call to advice or call to action for a manager in taking on this and taking in a very serious manner in terms of the do's and don'ts, just purely from a perspective of making foresight as part of their DNA or sort of their culture, to kind of the do's and don'ts, and then maybe as also on the Gen Z side, the do's and don'ts, right? So two there. And then the final question is there one or two companies that you admire, I mean, among all your work, who you say that, these guys are always trying to be at the forefront, and it doesn't have to be, their record of, hey, I mean, come up with X amount of, innovations, but the fact that they believe in the process, they believe in the, the investment of the philosophy rather, right? So two final questions.
Yeah, so I'll start with the example. One of the, I think, most inspiring sort of commitments publicly to foresight that's come out recently was IKEA. And IKEA basically pronounced that they weren't going to be stuck in this 3 to 5 year strategy cycle anymore, that they were going to focus more on emergent strategy, and that foresight was going to be a critical part of that. And so there was an article in the Harvard Business Review, and they said, look, scenarios are part of our DNA now. We're an organization that wants to engage with possibilities. And I think that type of public pronouncement, that type of accountability, not only to themselves, but to the whole organization, and say, like, we're going to do this, is really a sign that, senior leadership at the top is taking it seriously, but also they're telegraphing to the entire organization and even globally that this is something that has value. And so I think that's a great sign of an organization that is really trying to put learning first and trying to attempt to engage in more critical and creative thinking about the future. When I think about the do's and don'ts and how I would weave in sort of Gen Z and foresight, I would say find those spaces, and if they don't exist, create them. How can you have shared learning? What can you actually do? And to your earlier point, maybe it's not 2 days in Bali, maybe it's a space in the office. So years ago, I won't name the organization, they really struggled to get ideas. They said, we know we have ideas, but how do we get them? And I said, well, what if you had this space called a what if wall? And the what if wall was, we have this black paint that you can write with chalk on it. And magically, over time, what if ideas started to emerge, and that actually led to different conversations in the organization, and I've remained in touch, and ultimately it led to some shifts, in practice and process. So I think, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be something that you can bring into the culture of the organization and help to normalize it. My colleague in South Africa, Geshe, has a great metaphor. We think of foresight as the crystal ball, but what if we thought of foresight as the toothbrush, as the brushing our teeth, the thing that we do every day that we know over time helps to create health? But there's the immediate benefit, right? We don't want to walk in anywhere with the bad breath. So I think this idea of like building health over time and having that healthy mindset is what we need to do. And a lot of times that means foresight is about shifting our mental models, shifting the language that we use, shifting the metaphors, the stories that we tell about things. So if we get away from the crystal ball and we move to the toothbrush and we see foresight as something that we have to do to be healthy as a lifestyle change, I think that's the biggest do. And so I think these don'ts are to get away from, the forecast and prediction, not that probabilities, not important, but we need to focus on spaces of shared learning and discovery, utilizing collective intelligence, that can really drive that trust and psychological, and ultimately to be able to think about how the organization can leverage that in a meaningful way, which means it has to be grafted on or integrated into different parts and processes that the organization is using.